Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello, and thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. The crop of 2023 is reported as being the most expensive crop to plant in U.S. history. Growers are looking ahead to 2024, trying to find a bright spot in that balance sheet for this next year, and maybe it's in fertilizer. Joining us now to talk through that industry is Josh Linville. He serves as the Vice President of Fertilizer for StoneX. Josh, thank you so much for joining us here this week.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Let's talk about what's developing here in the world of nitrogen, Josh. We've seen huge drops in price over the last 2 years to where things sit now. Are these lower prices going to persist?
Yeah, if you look at it, we topped out fertilizer prices back in March, April of 22, and current nitrogen prices are probably about 60%, give or take, lower than what they were at that point. So we've seen a tremendous lower value out there. And I don't think that we're going to repeat that situation. I don't think we're going to challenge those new highs. It just took so many situations building on top of each other to get to that point. However, to sit there and say, are they going to stay as low as they are? That's kind of where the market's trying to figure out today. There's a lot of events going on around the world that's starting to challenge that prices are going to stay as low as they have been.
Josh, one of those events that's been developing around the world is the fighting in the Middle East and the rocket attacks on the Red Sea. In the world of fertilizer, is that Suez Canal and Red Sea a big thoroughfare?
It's a huge thoroughfare, and it's been a very, very big issue. As we came out of the Christmas, New Year's period, we thought fertilizer was going to go through a little bit more of a dead period. We thought that we'd have a little bit of an opportunity for prices to fall a little bit further because we had so much time before spring. Well, unfortunately, the Red Sea attacks have now kind of pushed that to the forefront. When you look at it, it doesn't mean that fertilizer can't flow west. It just has to go south around the tip of Africa. What that means is more logistical costs. That vessel is going to charge you for those extra days. And you start talking about the extra days, it adds on another 10 to 15 days of sail time to get that product from the Middle East over to the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay, so we could see supplies get a little tight from time to time if this impact continues.
I'm holding out hope that everything will work out fine. It seems like no matter how many times we talk about all these bad things that can happen, we always seem to get through it fairly well. But this is definitely a wrinkle we did not foresee happening.
Josh, all that being said, I know this was a light winter or a light fall for a lot of growers. Did we get enough fall application on to maybe buy a little breathing room?
For the most part, actually, it was a fairly decent fall run. There were pockets that absolutely had the tough go of it, but a lot of other areas actually beat their forecast, beat their expectation for the fall. So I would say overall, it was actually a heavier fall than normal. I think we probably saw a little bit of that spring demand stolen away just because farmers were sitting around saying, well, I got all this other stuff done. Let's just go ahead and do a little bit more and get that stress off the table for, March, April time period. So yeah, that's going to actually help reduce a little bit of that stress that we thought we were going to see.
All right, good to watch there. So that's nitrogen, values down, stable for the time being with some concern internationally. Josh, I want to take a look at phosphates because it sounds as though that's a totally different market dynamic here as this new season develops.
It is. And unfortunately, from a U.S. perspective, from a North American perspective, these countervailing duty rates still continue to impact free trade flow around the world. And we are the one that's having to pay the price for that. I talked about nitrogen prices being down 60%, give or take, from what the highs were back in March, April. Phosphates are also down, but we're only talking about 40%. Prices topped out in the Gulf of Mexico for DAP about $1,000 short ton USD. Today, that number's sitting at about $600, $605, depending on the day. So we've seen values down, but just not near to the extent. And inventories remain tight. The big fall means that we emptied the system, and now we're all of a sudden getting to the springtime, not having those normal flows coming from Russia, coming from Morocco. Things are still going to be tight as we move into that March period.
Things are going to be tight moving into that March period. Josh, growers, do we have time to hedge our bets before purchasing any phosphate, or do you just bite the bullet?
Unfortunately, I think if we're talking pre-plant type stuff, I think we're getting to that bite the bullet period. It doesn't seem like it. Right now, it seems like winter's going to last forever. March is literally around the corner. Logistics are working against us.
Plan ahead, folks. That's Josh Linville, Vice President of Fertilizer with StoneX. Josh, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
Today's larger, heavier equipment can lead to more soil compaction issues. Firestone Ag IFVF tires with 82 technology maximize load capacity while minimizing soil compaction. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more. And now it's time to talk markets. Specifically, we're going to dive into the protein markets with Dennis Smith of Archer Financial Services. Dennis, thanks for taking the time to join us this week.
Thank you, Mike.
Last Friday, we saw the cattle on feed report come out. Traders weren't anticipating too much with this one, Dennis, but how did it materialize?
Yeah, it came out as expected. Placements were down 4%, so at 96%. Marketings were 99%. That was also as expected, but there was one less weekday this year versus last year. So that's a positive marketing number. It really translates to about 104% marketing. And Mike, that's the first positive marketing number we've seen in months. So it was a supportive report.
It was supportive. And Dennis, as you mentioned, that first we've seen in a while, it appears as though this live cattle market has found a bottom. Is that your take on the way prices are trading here?
Most definitely. Wholesale beef has bottomed out. Cash steer prices have bottomed out. We're still running on feed numbers 102% above a year ago, or 2% above a year ago. But we're going to see the math change rather drastically. We think placements in January will be way down due to the weather, and overall you're going to see lower placements over time.
Dennis, you mentioned the weather, and we saw that weather get wintry real quick as we came into January. I know in December we were looking at record carcass weights coming out of feedlots. Is that changing?
Yes, it is changing. Yeah, November, December feedlot conditions were probably ideal. Performance of cattle was excellent, and that's all changed due to Mother Nature and these January storms. Weights were record heavy. There's no doubt about that. That's a measured fact. Weights are now coming down quickly, and they may stay above a year ago, but they are coming way down from the record high territory.
Cattle have been volatile for 3 years now, Dennis, it seems, and a lot of the focus has been on total herd size and inventory. We're going to get an update at the end of January from the USDA. What's your expectation for this overall cow herd?
Yeah, this is the annual cattle inventory, the snapshot, so to speak, of the beef industry, and it'll continue to show a smaller calf crop, maybe down 3%. It's going to confirm that the beef herd is probably down over 9% from 4 years ago, and that dictates lower beef production, not only for this year, but for next year, probably for 2026 as well.
Dennis, cattle feeders have been through a lot of trouble with high feed costs, high input prices over the last couple of years. How do they handle this potential rally that could be coming here in live cattle?
Well, you want to be careful about getting short the board. You want to use options to hedge your production. Try to leave the upside open as much as possible, because I think a big rally is coming.
How big? Dennis, can we nail you down a little bit? What could we see this market turn into given the factors at play?
I think you'll see record high prices. You'll see the September highs taken out before the end of this year. Exactly how high we go, nobody knows, certainly not myself. But this market is poised for another major move higher.
Given the fact that things have stabilized, you mentioned protecting that upside with options. How have option pricing been lately in the cattle market? Is it affordable?
Yeah, it's very affordable, especially if you open up your mind, use your imagination a little bit, writing some premium, because of the volatility. The option volatility is attractive from the sell side of the standpoint. We can certainly design strategies.
All right, lots to watch here in this cattle market, Dennis. We've got a lot to talk about with feeder cattle, demand looking down the road, and what could happen with supply. So stick around. We'll be back with more with Dennis Smith of Archer Financial Services. Today's larger, heavier equipment can lead to more soil compaction issues. Firestone Ag IFVF tires with 82 technology maximize load capacity while minimizing soil compaction. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more. We're back talking the protein markets with Dennis Smith of Archer Financial Services. And Dennis, we talked about the potential for a rally in the live cattle market later on this year. I want to bring it back and focus on demand. We've seen Chinese purchases over the past several years grow. Now there's concern about their economy. Are they still going to be a player in the U.S. beef market?
Yeah, interesting things. Overall, beef exports have been down because of high prices, but we've noticed a trend of more beef going to China. And what we're developing, or what we're noticing, is the self-sufficiency of beef in China is way off the charts. In other words, they're starting to consume far more beef than what they produce. And more specifically, the Chinese really like U.S. grain-fed beef. So we're looking looking for beef exports to China to actually increase this year, despite their problematic economic situation.
Well, that is good news, moving more beef off U.S. shores. But Dennis, I want to ask you about the other concern I've heard from cattle producers, which is cheaper beef coming in from South America and beef imports being a factor. As you look out, how big of a role is that going to play, beef imports to the U.S.?
It will play a role, but we are seeing Brazil not only exporting a lot of beef to China, but they're also, we believe, reducing their beef herd. They continue to convert cropland, or I should say pasture land, into row cropland, and this is reducing the size of their overall beef herd.
Okay, so longer term, Brazil imports may be less of an issue for American producers.
Correct.
All right, Dennis, American demand. That's mainly the driver here in this cattle market. We had GDP out this week up 3.3%. U.S. consumers still willing to write the check for beef?
Yeah, and what we're seeing is consumer confidence is really taking a big move higher, and with everybody working with improved consumer confidence, we think domestic beef demand is in great shape.
All right, Dennis, that is an optimistic outlook in the cattle market. No doubt good news to a lot of producers. I want to turn our focus to the hog market, if we can, for a minute. It sounds as if things are getting interesting over in the hog trade. Dennis, can you fill us in on what's happening?
Things are changing rapidly. Cash hogs sharply higher this week, and it appears like the numbers are not accurate in the most recent hog and pig report, possibly going back as far as 6 months. It seems like there's been an overcount, and the supply of butcher hogs right here in front of us is just simply not as large as what we've expected. So things are changing rapidly in the hog market, and that could be really good news for hog producers.
It could be, given that it is so volatile and happening right now. Dennis, how do producers maximize this? What do you recommend?
Well, we've not been hedging because prices have been below break even clear out through summer and fall pigs. So kind of just give this a little bit of time and watch and see where these summer hog markets go. They could show you some real strength here near term.
Was it just a year ago that summer hogs were well over $100?
Oh yeah, most definitely, and we've not even been close to that here approaching spring this year.
All right, but might have some news developing right now, things to keep an eye on. Dennis, thank you so much for joining us today and filling us in on how these markets are developing in 2024.
Thank you, you're welcome.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
Yes, meteorologist Greg Solier joins us now with a look at what's coming from the skies. And Greg, out in the Pacific Northwest, it sounds like it's going to stay active.
It will, and ultimately south into California. We're keeping an eye on the return of the old atmospheric river. Back when the weather forecaster here was in school, we used to call it the Pineapple Express, but at least much of this week ahead, fairly typical stuff. But just beyond that, moisture coming back into play. And here's the early vestiges of that trip off, a system offshore of Northern California, the Pacific Northwest. Note the flood of milder Pacific air, downslope winds, the old Chinook warming across the Canadian prairie, the Dakotas, where snow cover has been kind of iffy and patchy. Of course, a couple of weeks ago, 35, 40 degree actual below zero air temperatures. We'll do it another 35 to 40 degrees in the other direction. Daytime readings well into the 40s and 50s. So do the math, quite a change in temperatures expected here, and what's left of the snow cover should be moving away and melting away in the coming days. And here's the weather system coming ashore to Northern California out towards SeaTac. No freezing rain or icing or glazing like we had here a week to 10 days ago. It's nothing but mild Pacific air, so that means fairly high snow levels as well. We'll keep an eye on the snow melt there. Meanwhile, wind and mild air across areas of the northern plains, southern Canadian prairie. No real winter feel expected out there as the week wears on. Into California, the early indications again out towards the Bay Area northward of a little moisture beginning to break out. We ultimately see these jet stream winds coming in off the Pacific, right off the Aleutians and Hawaiian Island chain, and that is a deep surge of tropical moisture system across areas of the southern plains. Nice to see some winter wheat improvement down there over the past assessment, the past week to 10 days. And here is this buckle jet stream pattern late in the week, wind and the first of several outbreaks of showers and thunderstorms. High snow levels means some flooding potential as well with snow melt and additional higher peaks. We'll get some significant snows too, 55 or so so percent of normal on the snow season so far across the Sierra. That's a big improvement. Here's wind and warmth across the heart of the winter wheat belt with temperatures almost early spring-like later in the week.
Northern Corn Belt saw substantial snow a few weeks ago. Greg, is that going to continue to melt?
And substantial snow melt. We're actually moving into kind of these thaw-freeze cycles here with, again, this west-northwest to southeast jet stream pattern. A little clipper system on the move. The Arctic air moving back up north towards the Sioux. A couple of snowflakes into the parts of the eastern Corn Belt, but a return to seasonal temperatures, if not milder than average, from the Black Hills on southward and west of the Missouri early in the weekend. Some of that milder air will work into the heart of the Corn Belt, too, with, again, thaw-freeze cycles expected. A little rain snow system for the upper Midwest, but again, pretty comfortable outdoor work, tending to livestock as well back into the plains, but muddy as all get out. And keep an eye on the streams and rivers coming off the snow melt and recent rainfall as well. They're running a little bit higher than usual, and along with that, ice jamming effects too. Meanwhile, in the southern plains we go, south end of the winter wheat belt. Boy, welcome rains, but too much of a good thing. More than a half a foot last week, but there should be some significant drought improvement coming off those rains. A couple of spotty showers into parts of Oklahoma and Texas early in the week. It's a quiet, mild, largely dry spell of weather ahead this week across the Delta. Points out of the east. Meanwhile, back to the west, outside of, again, some issues with lingering drought, we're in pretty good shape with outdoor work with winter wheat fields in mind into the central and southern plains. Greg, take us all the way to the Atlantic coast. What do you see as this week gets deeper? One weather system on the maps and charts here kind of making its way up across the northeast of New England. That'll throw back some wind and cold and snow. What else is new? Just about every type of precip has come on down, including flooding this wintertime season. Pretty quiet weather pattern. The rain, the fog, and the snow melt winding down across the Corn Belt. Any lingering cold air into the northern Great Lakes region, and a pretty comfortable go of it expected across much of the Corn Belt. Footing issues for livestock and outdoor workers, you bet, but very comfortable. Some sunshine returning as well. Wind and mild weather back into the western Corn Belt. Still a touch of winter into the northeast and New England. Again, into the Delta region, the southeastern states reaping the benefits of last weekend's rainfall, including parts of Florida. Perhaps a couple of wet snowflakes expected. Higher peaks of the Appalachians early in the week. Weather system across Texas, no big deal there. It'll be off the maps and charts with seasonal temperatures across the Carolinas. High pressure across the Delta region. Lots of sunshine. Mild weather expected back west to the Mississippi River. Runoff will continue on into the lower Mississippi Valley coming off last weekend's rain.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Pentair Hypro, a global leader in innovative spray technology for farmers for over 75 years.
Yes, it's that time of year to take a look back at the records and see just how those individual fields performed through this growing season. I've caught up with a lot of growers so far this winter who have said that those final numbers ended up being a lot stronger than they'd looked at those fields back in June or July. One grower who's seen this is Richard Fordyce. He's the business director for OBP. He's also a cattle producer and row crop farmer in northwest Missouri, and he talked with Max Armstrong about how these conversations have been popping up.
Same conversations that I've had with folks. Same situation on our farm. We had some real weather challenges. Shorter rain most of the year, 2 hailstorms and a derecho, and we still had a pretty good crop.
You had everything but a pestilence almost.
We did.
That could always come along too.
It could.
But one thing that we had this year too was smoky skies over a wide expanse of the major crop producing areas. It was just kind of remarkable many days to see how hazy it was.
You know, it was, and I'm sure we've seen that before, but I don't remember it. And you know, you'd wake up in the morning and at least in northwest Missouri, you'd look off to the west or off to the north, and the sky was a funny color. And you know, you had to be reminded, you know, listen to the news or listen to a broadcast to get the reason why the sky looked like it did. But lots of fires, lots of places.
I think many of us recall, well, you're probably too young, Mount St. Helens erupted
I do
back in
remember
the
that.
early 80s, and it did give us some beautiful sunsets and sunrises as well. I wonder if that had a tempering effect a little bit, that smoke, that haze, and maybe softened some of the weather impact.
It could have. I know we had a stretch when it was just pretty hot, along with no rain. And maybe it did. Maybe it was like wearing sunglasses for the crop.
Nights weren't quite as hot too, I think, in many instances. Some of the growers commented. One thing I'm reminded of in previous years, you know, we tend to think of drought years. We tend to think of those severe weather events such as the Great Derecho across Iowa. They provided opportunity
for farmers. It may have been a fleeting opportunity, but there was an opportunity sometimes to market because of adversity.
Yeah, I think, again, the conversations with farmers about how challenging weather, but the crop was pretty good. And this past year, this past growing season, we didn't see as many peaks and valleys, or maybe peaks, in the market because of the weather. And I started noticing that last summer during the growing season, and of course listening to USDA reports, as the growing season was happening, and sometimes folks are a little critical of those reports, but by gosh, they're probably going to get them pretty close.
It makes you wonder if there's a time coming somewhere down the road where commodity traders will look at this and they'll say, wait a minute, weather can be discounted because we continue to have great yields, and there are other things maybe to look at.
I think that's right. We used to say that we sure hoped it wasn't raining in Chicago when we were not getting rain in Missouri.
Oh, we saw that so many times. Orion and I watched that. A cell would move right over LaSalle and Jackson.
Yeah.
When we had the pit traders elbow to elbow and face to face, and it may have been dry as a bone elsewhere, and they broke the market on a particular day.
That's right. And so I don't know what'll happen, but I do think that this season is a great example of the enormous number of dollars and the time spent in research and development on seed technology, traits, and those sorts of things that just really make those corn, soybean plants, a lot more resilient. Can sit there a little bit longer and wait for rain, or go ahead and do their thing without rain.
I assume policymakers can't take their eye off the ball in terms of risk management with crop insurance. We need to still have that valuable tool, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you listen to some of the conversations and deliberations around the next farm bill, it seems as though most folks are in agreement that certainly needs to stay there. And I would agree. Any opportunity for the Farm Bill to offer protection to farmers through safety net programs, crop insurance is a great example, I think really need to be there.
Shifting gears just a little bit, we're watching crops in South America now too, and they continue to dramatically expand acreage. It's a reminder of the intense competition of the global marketplace. But it's a reminder, too, to continue to develop new markets, new uses, as American growers have done so well. Am I not mistaken about that, Richard?
No, you're exactly right. I think when we think about historic overseas markets for U.S. farm commodities, obviously China comes to mind and others. And, I think that the different trade organizations that represent the different commodities, and certainly, the government has a role in this too with the trade rep and so on, are looking, and I think they do a nice job, looking at population changes in places. There are countries where we are very significantly involved in trade that we weren't maybe 10 years ago, and one of those reasons is you see either the economies improving in those countries, or the population is shifting, either more or less or whatnot. So I think it's really reassuring that folks that know a lot more about it than I do are watching those trends and really making the investments in those countries where we can really build demand for U.S. commodities and do a good job at it.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH. Built by farmers.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. I know it is cold across much of the country right now for growers, but it's never cold inside a place that's climate controlled. And one of the great things about this time of year is it is the time for farm show season. Max, of course, has been out and about touring the countryside, and he found a great farm show, but you may just have to know where to look.
Mike, don't look for it on the map. I think you'll have a hard time finding Gordyville, Illinois. But it's in east central Illinois, not far from Champaign, Illinois. It's not home for us, but it's pretty doggone close to it. We get here often to talk with many of our farm friends. And at the show, the Midwest Ag Expo held here this week, we had the opportunity to talk, well, with a banker friend, for one, Andy Boer.
Right now we're really seeing some things with people buying inputs and some of that. Nice thing is prices are a little bit lower on that. The interest rates are on everybody's mind as well. The commodity prices are kind of a thing. There's still a lot of corn stored. Soybeans, there's some of that yet around here. A lot of bins are full yet, and guys are wanting to move some grain, but really the prices are making it where they don't want to, but they're starting to anyway.
One thing that I've heard so many times through the years, when you go through periods like this, it's good to stay in contact with your lender. Let them know what's going on. The best surprise is no surprise.
That's right, exactly. If we keep an open and honest conversation between the two of us, it's really easy to get some of that information back and forth. With today's technology and stuff, a text, this and that can be so simple, but yet so effective on some of that. And, just letting you know how many bushels I've sold or what I've delivered or this or that, it really is helpful for the conversations we have later on.
And a local co-op was represented here too at this show. Tim Hughes is with the Premier Cooperative.
There's no downtime anymore. Opportunities anymore seem to come quickly and fade quickly. So we're always trying to outreach to our growers and have them stay in constant communication.
The volatility we see in the world now, I don't think it's ever been greater. You've watched OPEC in the past, but now we have so many things we have to keep an eye on that can affect not only fuel cost, fertilizer cost, and other inputs.
Absolutely, and I guess I won't go as far as say it's unprecedented, but for this length of time, it seems like the new norm is chaos and volatility. Like I said, opportunities can be there, but they can be gone pretty quickly, and just doesn't seem like we have the time to make decisions like we used to.
One thing we noticed this year, many of the growers in your area shared with us that they had better than expected yields. Their expectations weren't too high, but they were a little bit surprised.
Better than expected, a good and a bad. Unfortunately, we're also, the markets are reflecting that, and growers are kind of taking a 1-2 punch right now because their basis levels aren't very attractive compared to where they were. Our competitors globally are doing well as well, but again, that's to have a good plan, be prepared when an opportunity knocks, and take advantage of it. And with volatility comes opportunity as well.
Yeah, keep that line of communication open. I guess that's what a banker would say, and also a gentleman who helps supply crop inputs to growers. It's not bad advice when we're going through one of these times of lean margins, Mike, as you know.
Yes, indeed, Max. It sounds like this is a year growers are going to want to sharpen those pencils while they're taking a look at that balance sheet. And while volatility does often bring opportunity, it can often bring stress as well. Folks, let's be sure we manage that in our lives.
Greg Solier is back now with his extended farm weather forecast for the nation.
Yes, it's time to look ahead to that meteorological outlook. Greg Solier joins us now. And Greg, you mentioned some moisture next week. Is it going to be snow for most of us?
Not for most of us. It'll be perhaps the rain back into areas of the southeastern parts of the country. Any snow and real tough winter potential would be early in the week as the rain snow line shifts southward with a feature coming up across down eastern Maine. Otherwise, a 1/4 to 1/2 inch, no big deal here in through the southeastern part of the country, allowing with this drier weather pattern, those streams and rivers into the upper Midwest as well. To ease on down, coming off some big rainfall totals last week in the lower Mississippi Valley, and certainly drought improvement. Little to none across much of the Plain States areas as the week wears on. Northern sections of the Rockies, Cascades, and the northern Sierra, moisture begins to pick up. Late in the week, it shifts on southward. Mike, that is the beginning of the atmospheric river and a start and return to a very active El Nino-driven weather pattern for California and the southwest here as we move through February.
Greg, does that weather system meet warm temperatures in that week of February 5th?
It certainly does. Not only Pacific air coming in, but some winds off the Canadian U.S. Rockies, downslope conditions through the upper Midwest. So look at the warmth relative to almost mid-February here through much of the Corn Belt locales to the Appalachians, down through the Rio Grande and southwestern section of the country. A little sliver of below average readings Pacific Northwest, at least into the first half of the month. No Arctic air, but a busy storm track right off the Hawaiian chain through the valleys of California into the Black Hills and points to the east and northeast from there. Look at the significant moisture gain and drought improvement with snowfall for much of the plains, sections of the southwestern part of the country too. Dry time continues on across the southeastern part of the country. About normal for the Corn Belt locales, both rain and snow there.
Well, Greg, the week of February 12th, National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville, Valentine's Day. How do things look?
Yeah, I think you'll get by without maybe finding your favorite snuggling companion, or maybe you want to. Who knows? In any event, look at the mild air for mid-February across the heartland here into Texas as well, through the upper Midwest sections of the country with that southwest to northeast jet stream pattern. Readings a little bit below average into areas of Northern California and the Pacific Northwest, where the storm track is busy and active across California into the desert Southwest. They've been lacking here on winter precip. Drought relief continues on through the western Corn Belt, Plain States areas, a bit below average over the southeastern part of the country. But Mike, very busy, active, and moisture laden heading through the first half of the month of February.
As we get to that last full week in February, Greg, do those warm temps stick around?
They do not, at least as it applies to the northern and western Corn Belt locales, all the way down into the desert Southwest here. Look at this U-shaped configuration to the jet stream pattern. Warmth, if you will, Ohio Valley out to the east. There's more Arctic air tooling across the Canadian prairie. This serves up a very busy and stormy weather pattern dropping in through Northern California. Areas of the southern plains will take more drought relief here, and swinging north and northeastward up towards the Sioux. Rain for the northeast and New England, but several snow storms and perhaps some ice potential for parts of the heartland. It'll be a busy month of February across the country.
Our Farm Progress Roundup is sponsored by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of high-quality, high-capacity field grain belts and augers. Visit brandt.ca for more. Well, now it's time to dig into what is happening in the world of policy. Josh Baitke serves as the policy editor for Farm Progress. Josh, thanks for talking with us this week.
Hey, good morning, Mike. Good to be here.
Let's talk about what's happening in Washington, D.C. First, we've had some back and forth over funding the government. Josh, how do things stand right now with regard to keeping the government open?
Well, it's open for the moment. The latest, we now have our third funding extension. Deadlines are now March 2nd and 8th before we face another potential shutdown. As far as progress goes, the leaders from the Republican and Democrat side were able to at least establish a top-line funding number, which is typically the first step to crafting a budget. So we have a number that they're going to be basing funding for the 12 appropriations packages on. Now they have another little bit more than a month to do it. I think the path to getting there is still unclear, but they're negotiating on it, and we'll kind of see what we have over the next month here.
So this process is going to be ongoing. Josh, I've got to imagine this is going to slow down the rest of Congress's timetable, which would include the Farm Bill. What's your take on whether or not that will get a vote this season?
Yeah, everybody I talk to is kind of resigned to the fact that nothing's going to happen on the Farm Bill until we get something done with the budget first. And, I was at the American Farm Bureau Convention this week in Salt Lake City, and everybody I spoke to said, if we don't have something at least introduced onto the floor by, say, the end of spring, maybe even as late as early summer, then the odds of getting a new bill probably are next to nil. You'll probably see an extension, through the rest of the year. So the appropriations is obviously going to be the focus of Congress first, and if they get something passed there, then Chairman Thompson, Chairman of the House Ag Committee, has indicated he'd like to get a bill introduced in March. I think that may be looking more like April now, realistically, but if that can happen, then maybe there's a chance. But again, chances aren't looking good at this point, I'd say.
All right, so we're making some progress, it sounds, on the budget side, but we've still got to wait for that Farm Bill for its turn in line. Josh, but you mentioned out at the American Farm Bureau annual meeting in Salt Lake City, Utah this past week. How were the crowds? What was the overall sense from the attendees as they look ahead to 2024?
It was a good crowd. I think that convention's always a fun time to get people together, from across the country and talking about the issues and some of the individual concerns. As far as the policy goes, I think the general impression I got was that there's just concern over the uncertainty. We have the uncertainty over the Farm Bill, over government funding. You also have a presidential election that, frankly, a lot of people have some reservations over, talking to people about that. No one was really too excited about either candidate at this point, generally speaking, but more concerned about what policies whoever's elected will put in. So I think everybody would, not everybody, but general overall would like to see some more certainty and knowing what they can expect in the coming years in the market and farming in general.
Absolutely. Everybody is looking for certainty, it seems. Josh Baitke, policy editor at Farm Progress. Your writings keep us all up to speed on what's happening in D.C. Thank you so much for joining us here this week.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Always good to be here.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed. where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. Every winter, it sparks a lot of memories when I encourage people on the social media, hey, show me your heat houser. There are some folks who recall what it was like using those every day, and yeah, some people still do. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants producers are made to make it last. Well, the other day while the American Farm Bureau convention was going on, a couple of former Farm Bureau leaders reached out to me with their memories about the old heat housers. Our friend Don Vilwalk in Indiana recalls that when he was a boy on the farm in southwestern Indiana, his dad would dispatch him into town to clean off the parking lot at the post office. He was sheltered some behind the heat houser. And my buddy Philip Nelson in northern Illinois, past president of the Illinois Farm Bureau, past Illinois director of agriculture, said yes, he spent many seasons working with a heat houser, but he's glad to have the comfort of the cab now. Let me show you some still being used. This JI case in Ohio is used by Logan Eads out there to spread the manure from his cattle operation. I believe he's near Mechanicsburg, Ohio. Tim Sleva in Nebraska has a Farmall H. Look at what he has out in front of it there to move snow. Here's a Farmall 806. This 806 tractor in Minnesota, Brett Lean, looks like he's well prepared to move the snows of winter in Minnesota. And David Millsap, I think I've shown you this one before, but it merits another look. This JI case in Virginia, that's I believe that's a golf cart top on that cab. Whatever to get the job done in wintertime. Mark Stock gets the job done every week at Big Iron Auctions. Here's his report.
Well, hi, Max. Land is still a hot commodity, and on Tuesday, January 30th, 290 acres of Hancock County, Illinois land will sell in 4 tracts. Land represents highly productive Illinois farmland with Class A soils. On Wednesday, January the 31st, 320 acres of LaSalle County, Illinois land will sell in 4 tracts. This land is located approximately 40 miles north of Bloomington. Also, some of the land is located by Streator, Illinois. Thursday, February the 1st, 686 acres of Schuyler County, Illinois land will sell in 7 tracts. Excellent opportunity for farmers, investors, and outdoor enthusiasts. Machinery-wise, Max, January the 31st features late model farm equipment, construction equipment, trucks and trailers. Greenway Equipment Inc. with various locations across Missouri and Arkansas are one of the featured sellers, as is Van Tool Farms LLC, their retirement sale by Leavenworth, Kansas. And Max, the buzz has already started regarding the Sullivan Collector Car 2-day sale coming up February 19th and 20th. We will have a lot of information on upcoming auctions as we attend the National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville, Kentucky in the middle of February.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. This week, for our Get to Know the FFA segment, we are talking to a member of the National Officer Team. Grant Norfleet joins us now. He is currently serving as secretary during this school season. Grant, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Let's talk about what got you into FFA. Grant, did you grow up knowing this was a place you'd find a home?
So I grew up on a small cow-calf operation in the southwest corner of Audrain County in northeast Missouri, and my dad teaches diesel technology at the Career Center. So I always grew up with the agriculture department right across the hallway after school. And I remember sitting with my dad when I was an 8th grader, filling out my course request form for freshman year of high school, had one class period open, and Dad said, hey, I think you should take a chance in ag class. You've seen FFA for a little bit. And what really got me into it after taking that leap from my father was a senior mentor who was a senior member that year. She took me under her wing and kind of showed me what FFA has to offer. And I think ever since Lauren, I like to say the rest is history.
That's fantastic. What have been some of your highlights, Grant, in your years of service with FFA?
I've really enjoyed getting to serve FFA in multiple capacities, and I'm humbled to serve this year as the National FFA Secretary. And I think one of the most exciting moments we've had as national officers this year were being invited to the White House by the president for the national turkey pardoning before Thanksgiving, getting to see, Congress in action and getting to see a presidential figure that supports the future of agriculture is really valuable, especially as we work as an organization to better implement and prepare students for careers in and outside of agriculture.
Absolutely. And of course, you'll be preparing those students at convention. I imagine that's something you're always working hard and thinking about next year's, aren't you?
Yes, for sure. Convention prep's always in the back of our minds.
Yes, indeed. Now, Grant, what are you planning for a future career? Do you hope to stay in the ag industry?
Outside of being a national officer, I'm a student at the University of Missouri in Columbia. I'm currently a senior studying agricultural education and leadership with an emphasis in communications and leadership. And beyond my time in the Blue Jacket and after I graduate from college, after I return from this year's service, I'm hoping to pursue a career in program and curriculum development, helping figure out how learners can learn better and help those educators serve those learners in various capacities.
That's what it's all about, taking that education to the people. Grant Norfleet, we wish you the best of luck going forward.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by Copperhead Ag Products. Visit copperheadag.com for more information. You know, a vacation in central Illinois in January is not often a top destination. But our tech reporter Chad Colby found a reason for many people to gather there.
Have you ever attended Precision Planning's winter conference over the years? This past week in Tremont, Illinois, they hosted over 5,000 growers and, get this, had 20 other locations across the U.S. and Canada to talk about their latest offerings and how they can help farmers do better. And let me tell you, at this year's winter conference, they had a lot to talk about. The first being Panorama. That's their new software suite. And essentially, from a smartphone or a desktop, you can coordinate all the data. From your Gen 3 2020 to your John Deere Operations Center or Climate Field View, you can put it all together. Speaking of putting it all together, look on the left here. They got a new 16-inch screen. You can see it right here running Symphony. And if you haven't heard of Symphony, that's something you can upgrade to your sprayer that gives you pulse width modulation, essentially individual nozzle control. They talked about some other plans in the future with that system, including See and Spray. Those kind of things are coming down the line as well. There was definitely a lot of enthusiasm around the world's first self-contained soil sampling lab. You're looking at it right here. It's called Radical Agronomics. And the thing they're trying to do is to eliminate human errors from the traditional process at the lab. We all know there's some challenges with that, and what do we all do? We keep doing the same thing over and over. This might be something new here. It's going to take a couple years to get this thing rolled out, but it was pretty interesting, and they're going after those challenges that you face with soil sampling. After you take the samples physically, you got to mark a bag. Well, no, not in this. They got this thing called a geotube that records all the data, but before the data goes in the soil, it goes through the geopress, and then it tags all that information right on the tube. Pretty impressive. And Mike, we'll save the big one for next week, the new Cornerstone row unit. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad, for that update. And I look forward to seeing next week's tech segment diving into that Cornerstone row unit. Folks, leave it here. We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness when we come back. Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to let you know that we appreciate you joining us each weekend right here. But as we get deeper into this winter and spring season, there will also be some opportunities for you to connect with us in person. Max Armstrong has the update.
Yeah, we call it the meeting season, Mike, the learning season, if you will, and many farmers with the tight margins are indeed taking care of that opportunity this winter. But it's also kind of a social event when you get together at places like the National Farm Machinery Show. Coming up in just a few days, that'll be the 14th through the 17th when you and I will be together at the Case IH exhibit here at Gordyville. We were standing around the folks with the red paint as well, but they always have a great opportunity there to visit with farmers from a wide expanse of the United States. That's one thing that has struck me in the past as we've been at the Case IH exhibit at the National Farm Machinery Show. I will meet farmers routinely from North Dakota, Montana, all the way down to Texas, and certainly out of the southeast United States. Quite a big representation, as you would expect, from Kentucky, Tennessee, southern Indiana, and Ohio. And yes, even Canadian farmers who will attend that show in Louisville. We look forward to talking about what's going on in the farm equipment business these days and sharing that story as you and I will be there for This Week in Agribusiness. One other thing that you'll notice, I think, at this show, this time of the year, often in the depths of winter, that Louisville Farm Show becomes a little bit of a cabin fever release for many. We've been battling the cold, battling the snow in many instances. There have been the ice storms too. So this will be the opportunity, I think, for some farmers to jump in the van, head to the show, see the tractor pulls in the evening that have been the hallmark of the Louisville show for quite some time. We hope folks will join us at the Case IH exhibit. You and I will be there on that Wednesday, the 14th, 10 o'clock in the morning, to do This Week in Agribusiness. Mike, I will count on seeing you there.
You bet, Max. I will be there. Folks, come celebrate Valentine's Day with Max and I. Wednesday, February 14th at the Case IH exhibit at the National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville. We're going to start taping This Week in Agribusiness at 10 a.m. We hope to see you there. Until then, folks, thanks for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next week right here for This Week in Agribusiness.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.